Hey, US1, how are you guys doing? Quick joke. Hey, what do sprinters eat? Nothing. They fast. There you go. All right. Um, so for today, um, we're going to talk about labor unions and workers' rights. We've been talking here about Andrew Carnegie, how he made money, Vanderbilt, how he made his money, Rockefeller, how he made his money. Well, they're making, boatloads of cash. What about the people who work for them? What do they get? What's in it for them? Who's looking out for them, right? Nobody is. And so the workers have to do it themselves. And so they organize and they form what are called labor unions. So that's kind of what we're going to start talking about today there. Um, Also, hopefully you're seeing this in time because there's a quiz today. So hopefully you've taken your quiz. Oh boy. Yes. So there's that. Um, okay. With that, I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and enjoy the weekend. Talk to you guys later. Okay, so today we're going to start talking about organized labor. And so labor is just another way of saying worker. And so organized workers, basically the workers getting together, speaking as one voice, basically pushing back against people like the likes of Andrew Carnegie, John Rockefeller, who we've been talking about. And so a workers organizing, these are called unions. And so unions were, unfortunately for the workers, they were weak during this time period because it becomes a supply and demand type of situation. Um, and so the way this would work is that workers would get together and they would find some inequity in the workplace. Either it would be the working conditions, safety, pay, number of hours, whatever it may be. And the thought was that if the workers band together and demanded as one voice a change, that the leverage they had was that they were the ones who were doing the work. So it's kind of like, hey, we want an extra, $2 an hour. And if you don't give us the $2 an hour, well, we're not going to work, right? That's kind of the logic, right? And them not working, that would be like a strike. Um, for that to be effective, you need leverage. And the thought is that if we're the workers, they need us. But this is also the same time period of all that massive amount of immigration that we were talking about last unit. So there's an endless supply of workers, which means the workers themselves don't have any leverage. So when the workers go to management and say, "Hey, we need $2 more an hour, or we're not going to work," the boss can say, "Fine," right? Fires all the workers and hire a bunch of immigrants, and those immigrants are looking desperately for work. You can give them even less pay. Um, and so this was a problem with labor unions, that they just did the supply and demand immigration kind of like worked against them. In terms of talking about unions, in terms of factory environments, there are things called closed shops and open shops. So a closed shop means that every employee must belong to a union or must agree to have the union represent them in that work environment. An open shop is the opposite. Either labor unions are banned, or that there's no requirement that you join a union to work there. Um, so, of course, workers want a closed shop, right? Giving them power, giving them a voice. And of course, management wants an open shop. And so, what are some of the conditions that we've been talking about here? Um, so, again, during this time period, the average male wage, so a man working, was making between $10 and $12 a week for a 60 to 80-hour week. To give you an idea now, a typical week right now, by law, caps at 40 hours. Okay, so you cannot work more than a 40-hour week without getting overtime. And of course, that's a victory. That 40-hour week is something that labor unions were able to achieve. Women doing the same work were making $6 to $8 a week. So you see an inequity there. The idea that Andrew Carnegie made $23 million in personal profit in 1900, his average worker got $500 a year, right? Part of the problems. And in 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt issued a study and found out that a quarter of the population, one out of every four people, was, quote, underfed, underclothed, and poorly housed. So this was a very difficult time to be a worker living in the United States. So unions were created to basically try to, you know, amend this and fix this. So the first national organization for workers was something called the Knights of Labor. Um, and the Knights of Labor allowed any worker who wanted to join. Now they didn't want immigrants because they thought immigrants were part of the problem with workers, right? That immigrants were basically willing to work less, and again, that supply and demand thing we talked about. Um, but by allowing all workers in here and having a national agenda, saying this is what we want workers all throughout the United States to get, it didn't work. It was too big. Workers want different things, have different needs, and so as a result, the Knights of Labor kind of fell apart and failed. A next attempt, or a later attempt at organization, was something called the American Federation of Labor, or the AFL, which was founded by Samuel Gompers, who you see on your screen there. And the AFL is still around today. And so the AFL, their difference was that they only represented skilled workers. And again, it goes back to this idea of leverage. So a skilled worker is someone that performs a job that you just can't get someone off the street to do, right? So before we talked about, well, if I don't get my $2 an hour, I'm gonna not work, right? And well, then I'll just find someone off the street to do the job. Here, though, you can't replace those people. Those people have to be, whoever you get in to do that job now has to be trained. There's going to be lag time. That gives the workers some form of leverage. Um, the other thing which made them effective is that they did not have long term national goals. So you would have the American Federation of Labor be very much concerned about the conditions in this factory. So maybe for this factory, it isn't so much how much they're getting paid, it's the working conditions. The machines are too dangerous. So the union will organize about making the machines safer. Maybe at a factory across town or in another state, it's about the salary. That there we need the $2 an hour. They were flexible, and they gave the workers the choice and the voice to say this is what we want and this is how we want to go about doing it. And as a result, they're quite effective to the point where they are still around today. But labor unions are not going to be popular, right? Because again, if workers get what they want, that eats into the bottom line of management, right? So if you give workers more money, if you have to spend money to make the factory safer, that's less profit for the owner. And that's the push and the pull, right? Every time a worker wins something, management feels like they're losing something, right? Every time management wins something, workers feel like they're losing something. At least that was the perception of the time. And so uh, there's going to be a strong incentive for management to make sure that their workers do not organize. And there's going to be efforts by both groups to try to get the American public on their side.